Since we met last February, the Contemplative Commons and the School of Data Science projects have been completed. And after last night's visit to the new football operations center, it was quite exciting. Moving to today's agenda, we have a couple of action items, including the proposed 2024 major capital plan. We have the review of the schematic design for the North Grounds parking garage and an overview from Colette on how the capital projects and budgets are developed and managed at the university. We're going to round out our agenda with an update from Alice on plans for the Shannon Court on the west side of the rotunda. I'd also like to say, I know that everyone remembers the last meeting and the subject of naming and the process of naming. I said then that I'd look into it. I have. I will say that in my mind there's a little bit of conflict. I think there are either 3 or 4 groups or people authorized with naming. I'm going to have to put that on hold till the next meeting to try and, in my mind, sort that out. Work with the rector and the president to see if what I think is right or wrong, and then we'll have to, I think, address the issue at the next meeting. So I'd like to present our first action item, which is the naming of the Molly and Robert Hardie Football Operations Center. As you saw yesterday, this is clearly, excuse me, clearly a state-of-the-art facility that's going to serve as the new home of our football program, encompass locker rooms, training areas, sports medicine, nutrition, offices, practice areas, meeting spaces, and I would say we also need a celebration room for when they come off the field. So, excuse me. Yesterday, President Ryan announced Molly and Robert's significant commitment to the Football Operations Center, and Jim highlighted their longtime support for athletics as well as various areas and programs here at the university. The rector couldn't join us for this morning's meeting, so we won't be able to put him on the spot again, but I'd like to underscore our gratitude to him and Molly, and we will be reminded of that at every home football game this year. The naming resolution is on page 3 of the committee book, page 51 of the board portal. Do I have a motion to approve the naming of the Molly and Robert Hardie Football Operations Center?
So moved.
We have a motion, a second?
Second.
A second, thank you. All in favor?
Point of order.
Pardon?
Before we have the vote, I'd like to make me totally support the naming. I would like to point out that I think we should do this before we actually have the celebration of the naming. It makes it look like what we're doing is totally moot to do it after the fact. But I think if we're going to be serious about this, we should do this first and then celebrate the naming. So with that said, I approve,
You're in favor. Thank you. Any opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you. Now, Colette, for the next action item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. We have one more naming. This is at the Darden School. You'll recall that we, in previous meetings, have had parts of the Arboretum named for various generous donors, bridges, gardens. This is the overall naming for the Arboretum, to be called the Tahija Arboretum. George Tahija is a 1986 alum of the Darden School. He actually resides in Singapore with his wife Laurel and serves as the director of a holding company based in Indonesia. The Tahijas are very engaged donors to the Darden School over many years and gave a quite generous gift to the Forum Hotel and Arboretum project. So we are recommending this naming for the Arboretum.
Thank you, Colette. Do I have a motion to approve the naming of the Tahija Arboretum?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Colette.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I was asking Colette if, when a situation like that occurs, if the maintenance and upkeep of that is included in the gift, and she said no.
No. Good point.
Okay, I'm having a little trouble
Okay.
advancing the slide. Thank you. Okay,
Go ahead.
next item is the approval of the 2024 major capital program. At the March meeting, we had this material in your books. It was a review time in order to give you a chance to look it over and ask any questions. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to really discuss it then, but it is back today for your review and approval. It's a very extensive process that we go through. It's kind of grounds up. It starts in September and culminates with today's presentation. So we started last year in June with a $2.7 billion capital program. Over the course of the last 12 months, we finished $577 million worth of projects. Some of the more notable ones are Contemplative Commons, football operations, Gaston and Ramazani houses, the School of Data Science, the Shannon Library, and the Wiley Library conversion at the college at Wise. We have a few projects to add to the plan and some to remove as well. So by the end of those ins and outs will be about $2.1 billion. And I'll talk about the adds and subtractions in a minute. This graphic, it just shows you that even with all of that at $2 billion, we're still over $1 billion in actual construction right now, over 50% of the program, with another $500 million in some form of planning and design. So this is kind of amazing amount of work that our teams are undertaking.
Yeah, I had a question, Colette. No, I'm sorry. Maybe you're getting to this because I know it's in the, but you just talked about the formulation of the plan, and we see, I think it would be useful whenever it fits the sequence, just to kind of walk us through kind of who's involved in developing, in setting the projects up, and just, 5 minutes or so, just walking us through, okay, here's a plan, what happens, what are the key milestones, how do we size it, cost it, just some flavor on that would be very beneficial for me and I think maybe others. Thanks.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about that in a following discussion item.
Okay.
And so if there's
Okay.
anything that we don't cover, then
We'll wait. Okay.
please ask.
And could we get Carla Williams to oversee every project so that it's built 3 times faster than anything else on ground? John, yesterday they said Carla got everything done in a third of the time they said it was going to take.
Wow. She did it.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So these are the additions to the capital plan. At Pinhole, that's the only full construction authorization we're adding at this point in time. This is a conversion of office space to wet labs. The School of Medicine is desperate for wet lab space for new investigators and faculty that we're hiring for the Biotechnology Institute, Mr. Manning. So we're going to try to convert some office space to wet labs in the interim until the building is finished. The rest of the authorizations are planning and design for projects that will ultimately likely become full-blown projects. But at this point, we try to work with our outside architects and our teams to better define the projects in terms of scope, size of buildings, some indication of budget, and look at some risks as well. I want to take a minute at this point to also advise the committee that we are trying something new again with our next housing project. We are currently on the street with an RFP for a third-party developer that we hope to enter into a partnership with. It's called a P3, a public-private partnership, for a team of firms to help us develop the next housing project. And we will be working through that process over the course of the summer, and we'll have further reports and bring things back for approval to this committee and to the Finance Committee in the fall.
Question. On that, will the developer then own that housing beyond its?
It depends on the arrangement. They could or they could not. They won't own the land, though. We're going to ground lease the land.
This is student housing?
Student housing, yeah. This is to further the goal of housing second-year students on grounds.
What is the status of the two other big projects, that are?
Well, they're both going through the site plan process with the city. So, I mean, we don't know that there's any hiccups there. They're just working. It's a long process with the city to get through their planning process.
The anticipation of when they might be open for business?
Well, I know that the developer whom we've spoken with at the Verve, the one on Emmett
By the state.
JPA Stadium, hopes to open in 2027.
And that's 12 or 1,300 beds? And the other one over by the Dish, how many beds is that one anticipated?
What is it?
That's 600.
500, 600, something like that.
Slightly behind in time frame, you think?
Probably, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So there are three projects that we're taking off the plan. One is the renovation of Old Cabell Hall, and not because it's not an important project to do, but this has been on the plan since 2009, and sometimes things just sit, and if there's not a realistic chance that we're going to embark on the project, we'd like to get it off the plan. It's been on there so long that this number's probably not the right cost. And frankly, we really need to construct the Center for the Arts, which will house the music department, which is currently in Old Cabell Hall. So we really can't do much in Old Cabell until we can move the music department. So you'll see this will come back later. The Penn Hall project was dependent on a federal grant. The school did not get the grant, so we're deferring that project. And then the museum, of course, that planning authorization is now incorporated into the Center for the Arts Planning. And the last thing is there are, short of a whole planning and design authorization, we often do short planning studies just to give us a better sense of what a project might entail. For instance, the athletic department, now that they've moved, on with Olympic sports in construction, they really want to look at 3 of their other major facilities just to see what's possible to improve those facilities in the future. Mike Lennox yesterday talked about perhaps another building on the Ivy Corridor for the entrepreneurism. We're going to revisit our study on the heat plant. We'd really like to get off of burning coal, but that's quite an undertaking to do that. The UVA rec department also wants to do kind of a master planning study of all of their facilities. One's not been done for almost 15 years, and we have incredible demand by our students for our rec facilities. About 96% of our students have some participation in rec sports or just, recreation for their own benefit, whether it's just going to the gym or something. And then Dr. Kent has a couple of studies under, oh, sorry.
So we have a coal plant. We actually operate a coal plant.
Yes, the coal burning, yeah. It burns natural gas, oil, and coal.
Where's it located?
Right down the street.
Across the street from the white spot.
Across the street from Burke's place, where the coal silos are.
There's 2 silos. Right. They're in silos. Yeah. Ah, so I did not know that.
Explain
about
the natural gas issue with the city.
Oh, yeah, so the natural
This
gas.
is the part you need to understand.
Yeah, well, So we burn natural gas, and once the natural gas prices were coming down, we burned more and more natural gas. But the city has a certain capacity to deliver natural gas, and in the coldest days of the winter, they will curtail the university. And so we have to have a backup fuel that can produce the steam, particularly that the hospital needs. So we're going to try to see what, fuel oil for the moment would be a backup potential if we can get off of the coal. So that's the longer term plan. And then Dr. Kent has a couple of studies in his area as well. I think those of you on Health System Board have heard about the redevelopment of the Grove Street properties, as well as the development of what's possible on the Oaklawn site, the historic home that we purchased about a year ago. So these will all kind of percolate and have studies done, and will ultimately likely result in some kind of a project in the future. Yes.
What is happening at Birdwood? I mean, is that becoming an event place?
Birdwood is a UVA Foundation-owned property right now, and they are renovating the house for a hospitality venue. Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other questions? Great. So there's an
I have
action
one
item.
question.
Yes.
The old Sears catalog building on Main Street, it always continues to worry me that is a data center building. In none of these projects we can fit a move of that to a more secure facility?
Not yet.
No.
And the health system has studied the data center options for quite a while, but we don't have a solution yet.
You meant Stacy Hall, correct?
Stacy Hall,
Yeah, Stacy
yeah,
Hall.
yeah.
Okay, got it.
It just doesn't reek of, modern data center.
It's still a work in progress.
Does it reek at all?
It might reek, but not a modern data center. That would be-
Thank you, Colette. Now I'd like to have a motion to approve the 2024 major capital plan for the academic division, UVA Health, and the college at Wise. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
A second?
Second?
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And I'll make this comment, follow up on one of the questions. I do think it might be helpful for the board to understand the planning process, not just approve it at the tail end. So I'll work with Colette and others to get that for the next meeting. All right? Okay, Alice, you're up.
Yes, sir. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The proposed site for the new UVA Center for the Arts is on parcels 8 and 9 of the Emmett Ivy corridor and wraps around the south and east sides of the existing parking garage, really mirroring the footprint of Virginia Guest House just to the west. The building will occupy an important and highly visible site in the corridor, perpendicular to the new School of Data Science, providing a public face along Emmett Street and fronting the 20-foot wide pedestrian promenade in front of the stormwater pond. Just as a reminder, the Center for the Arts will be home to the Richard and Tessa Ader Performing Arts Center, the Fralin Art Museum, the Kluge Aboriginal Art Collection, and the Department of Music. While an important site for an important program, this building will also be part of an ensemble of buildings that are intended to create a collective sense of community, offering shared resources and building on our tradition of buildings and mixed uses in a harmonious relationship with the landscape. So I'll be bringing a proposal to you in September for a schematic design review, but in the meantime, I'd like to ask for approval for the concept site and design guidelines for the UVA Center for the Arts.
Thank you, Alice. Do I have a motion to approve? Yes.
JJ, can you tell us what % of the money needed to build this facility has been raised?
Oh, well, we've raised $50 million, and I think Jim could speak more eloquently to that. And we're waiting to see, we're hoping for a future state appropriation. But additional fundraising is underway.
You
There's a
don't
lead.
build it until it's 75.
Correct.
75.
We'll follow the guidelines that are stipulated. So they're moving forward with the planning, and obviously additional fundraising and state appropriations would need to come to fruition past the planning phase to go to construction, which is required by the board.
What's the anticipated cost of the building?
315 million.
315 million.
We have a long ways to go
Yes.
before we get that 75%.
Yeah, and I have said this before and will say it again, I don't think we can move forward if we don't get support from the state. So we have planning authorization from the state, which is a good sign.
Yeah.
And the state has funded similar centers at other campuses. So I'm optimistic, but it will take a little while. But everyone knows that we need state support for this to move forward.
When will that ask occur?
Well, this session,
Yeah, we'll do it in summer.
unclear, because it's the second year of the budget.
Biennium.
So it may not be until the year after next. And you honestly never know. I mean, there's been a halt on capital projects for the last couple of years. But being in the pipeline helps.
Absolutely. And we did make the formal ask last year as the first year of the biennium.
Yeah.
So we're in the queue, and as Jim stated, the fact that the state authorized our pre-planning is the first indication that ultimately it will be funded.
And I would say that we are asking for a motion simply to approve concept, site, and design, because without that, they can't go forward whether the money's raised or not. So, do I have a motion?
So move.
Thank you. A second?
Second?
And a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, and it carries. Now, schematic design review for the North Grounds parking garage. Kind of tough to get excited about a parking garage, but we've got one. Go ahead.
I think this is a pretty exciting plan, Mr. Chairman.
That was a setup line.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Actually, Mr. Chairman, I told Alice this is the most beautiful parking lot I've ever seen, and I meant it. It's really beautiful. It's high praise. So thank you very much. As you recall, this past March, you approved the concept site and design guidelines for the North Grounds parking garage at the intersection of Massey and Copley Roads, just across the street from Palmer Park, our softball stadium to the south, and parking for the JPJ Arena to the east. To give you an overall perspective of the site, this is an aerial of the athletics district looking west along Massey Road. The Football Operations Center and the Olympic Sports Center, both of which we celebrated yesterday, are on the left. JPJ is on the right, and you can see the site for the parking garage on the right, outlined by the dashed white line. And through the magic of Photoshop, a little faster than construction, here's the same view now with the proposed North Grounds garage shown on the other side of the JPJ lot. So zooming in on this aerial view, you can see how the garage has been set back from Massey Road to prioritize a pedestrian zone as well as to create a significant landscape space at the street edge. I'll describe the options for this space in the next few slides, but it's worth noting how the landscaped area along Palmer Park crosses Massey to create a lovely landscaped civic node in front of the garage, and how the green in front of the garage provides the opportunity for event tents, which are the little white rectangles shown in this rendering, which could provide opportunities for retail and controlled tailgating. The proposed plan, the site plan shows this setback from the corner, which accomplishes many things. Not only does the setback lessen the impact of the parking structure along the street edge, but it provides a generous landscape zone for the events that I just mentioned. This diagram shows where the pedestrians will walk, the buses will queue for pickup and drop-off, both for daily commuting as well as for events. The plan includes a space for a multimodal hub where people can rent, store, or repair bicycles and gather to wait for buses protected from the elements. This plan shows the locations for entry to and egress from the 1,030 space garage. The land slopes up along Massey, which allows us to have one entry and egress from Copley Road at the first level, and then another entry and egress from Massey Road, which really will help move traffic as the garage empties during events. The buses also have a separate drive aisle, simplifying our university transit operations that can load and unload from the covered transit hub. And setting the parking structure back from the road also allows for any future building we might want to consider at the street edge. So the potential for future buildings per the master plan are shown in the dashed lines. So here's a view looking towards the site from Copley Road with Palmer Park on the left. Now moving closer, crossing Massey, this is the view from the pedestrian plaza, looking towards the garage and the multimodal hub, with the entry and the stair tower clearly marked. The stair and elevator towers provide direct, safe access to the transit hub and the civic node from the garage. The proposed materials for the garage are meant to tie this structure into the athletics district with brick to match JPJ, Palmer Park, and the football operations building, which will be set in precast panels, much the same way we are constructing Fontaine Garage. The border of the brick panels and the column screen will be precast to match our Swiss coffee color that we use all around grounds, as will the metal columns of the colonnade and the perforated metal screens. So this image shows the full south elevation of the parking garage and a partial plan of the transit hub just below it. The canopy of the hub has opened landscape spaces shown in the green area that bring light to the bike storage and the service areas. So here's now a view from the hub looking south across the landscape plaza towards Palmer Park. The length of the colonnade is broken by those open roofed areas and landscaped areas that I mentioned. And you can see how the canopy provides shelter from the elements for people waiting to board the buses. So this is a view from the JPJ parking lot looking west towards the bus aisle in front of the garage. I'll mention here that we've heard that the stair towers may be too stark a contrast in terms of their materials, so we'll be looking at the final materials when we come back to you for approval in September. Here's a closer view of the colonnade along the multimodal hub with potential for pre- or post-event activity on the lawn to the left. And finally, a view from the north end of Copley Road at the intersection of the drive to the JPJ garage. Interestingly, because of the slope of the land and the heavy tree canopy, it's really difficult to see the garage from this view, but it was important to study because hopefully in our master plan, we hope to make the connection from Copley Road to Millmont Street at some point to aid the traffic, and it was important to study this view. So in the bigger picture, by providing a destination and a pleasant experience for commuters, the North Grounds Garage will promote the sustainable use of university bus systems, bicycles, electric bicycles, and the bike share programs. At a detail level, the building itself will have sustainable initiatives incorporated into designs such as natural ventilation, the ability to have photovoltaic panels on the roof, and the landscape will provide stormwater bioretention as well. So I will bring this back to you for approval in September, but in the meantime, I'm happy to answer any questions or comments you have.
Would you go back? I think the board needs to really understand that event space. There.
That one? This one?
No, go back, right there. It's really interesting to take the space, if you look where the canopies or those tents are to the left of the bus, there's an open space there that'll be, I'll call it activity, events. So there'll be more than just parking here. I think that's a tremendous planning. Thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, this is great. Alice, sometime get me some Swiss coffee so I know what color that is. But the main thing is you satisfy me with red brick. You know, that's, in all seriousness, though, if you look at your slide 21,
It's the circulation one.
circulation one,
Thank you.
if one's coming in off of Leonard Sanders Parkway down Massey for a basketball game now, unless you're coming in at least 45 minutes before game time,
Yes.
it is a 30-minute drive to my parking spot in the JPJ garage. It's about a 40 to 45-minute egress from that. And I'm really concerned, Mr. Chairman, about our traffic flow adding another 1,200 spaces there. I mean, we're going to be like going to a University of Alabama football game and taking half a day to get in and out. What are we doing for traffic flow
So-
to make sure it doesn't get worse?
So that, Mr. Now also raised that question during our review. So we have traffic engineers that are studying this. It's important to keep in mind that these are not all net new spaces, that we have been building on our surface lots. Quite recently, you saw the football operations building and Olympic sports. The grass fields around U-Haul were all parking spaces. So we're replacing a lot of spaces that were there to begin with. But I understand, your point that the traffic is not good now. This will make it marginally worse by a number of seconds, not significant minutes. But I do think that if we make the connection to Millmont and Arlington Boulevard, that will unlock what is really a giant cul-de-sac of north grounds. But this garage is very important for those reasons, that we're replacing existing spaces that we removed when we did some of the capital plans, but also a lot of these parkers are going into the surrounding neighborhoods. And this is obviously drawing the spaces, the parkers back to, the events that they're going to.
Will this be paid parking for those who park at Barracks Road, or will they have to subscribe through the VAF to get a parking pass?
It will be permit parking it'll always be permit parking. I don't know about Barracks Road.
So during the day, and weekday, it's a commuter line, basically.
But
Very
for an
much.
athletic event?
But for athletics, I believe.
The
yeah.
people you say are parking in the community on the street,
I
or
see
they're
what you
going to Barracks Road and walking over, and you're saying that they might start coming here now. How are they going to get in?
That's more the commuters or the daytime.
Yeah, I think that I don't know that they're parking in the neighborhoods because of, the cost. I
We
think
could
they're
ask our
parking.
Director of Parking and Transportation,
Yeah.
who's here.
Nancy, your
Scott
first-
Silsdorf.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Scott Silsdorf of
So some of the people at the end of the table might not
Good
hear.
morning. I'm Scott Silsdorf, I'm the Parking and Transportation Director, and thank you for the comments about the garage. We have been working very diligently to get it this far along for the last, as long as I've been here, since August. So, but during the events, it will be a paid parking facility, most likely not VAF, but we haven't really determined that exactly. VAF will most likely remain in the existing spaces. So you've got to remember, this is sort of supplementing what Emmett and Ivy Garage is currently doing. And so some of the folks who are parking in Emmett and Ivy will now be parking in this facility because of all of the development in the Ivy corridor. And then for the day-to-day use, it is a commuter garage, and so most of it, which is why we use the multimodal elements and try and promote all the other options. That is a commuter permit, basically. So it's essentially all the folks who can't park right here in Central Grounds or the other locations that have remote parking, this will be their hub, their day-to-day parking hub with a lower cost annual parking permit.
And that wasn't as much my concern, Mr. Chairman, as it is for events. And if we're going to pay, if people are going to pay to come in there, then that increases the time for ingress, because they then have to pay a machine or pay a human, and it takes longer for the traffic flow to get in. Again, traffic flow there is terrible now during an event.
We're moving as quickly as we can to as many prepaid parking options, so
Yeah.
folks are instead proving that they've paid in advance, and then if they haven't, are then having to pay. So
Yeah.
it slows that down, but that's a valid concern
Thanks.
for sure.
Janice?
I was just going to point out that from a faculty staff perspective, having more parking is really critical. I hear all the time that there's not enough parking, and that lot will become a staff faculty parking during the day, right? Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think it's a big need. So I just want to let everybody know that from our perspective, we need that. And we do pay for it, staff and faculty.
Your concern is events,
Right.
correct? All right, we'll look into that.
How far off, how plausible is the connection to Millmont or to Arlington? Because I think that's the way to ease some of the pressure.
We're actually doing a study to know the cost. It can happen at any time. It's just a question of funding.
Anything else?
And if there are no other comments, thank you very much.
Okay, Colette will now provide an overview of how UVA develops and manages each of these individual capital projects, and importantly, how we develop the budgets. It's intended to be informational, and we'll have questions. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to invite my my other partner here, Don Sundgren, who's the Chief Facilities Officer. I think all of you know who he is. But really between Alice's team and Don's team, I mean, they are the ones who develop capital projects at the university, from the very first concept all the way to the ribbon cutting like we did yesterday. So I'm going to walk through a few slides. Please ask questions. This is purely informational. And given the comments made earlier, if we haven't addressed a particular thing that you're interested in, I mean, we can follow up with a supplemental presentation at the next meeting in the fall. But to starting out, I mean, you saw on the capital plan some of those planning and design authorizations that you approved. And we start, sometimes if we don't even have enough to do that, we'll just do a feasibility study, just to kind of get a concept for the project. And then we'll go into selecting an architect or an engineer, depending on the project. And in the course of developing the design, we'll figure out what construction method we want to use. And there's basically three: designing the project all the way through to construction documents, all the way to where you're ready to bid it, and then do basically a low bid public procurement. Yes?
But could you go upstream just a little bit more? Like, you have a project. Where does that come from? I mean,
Okay, yeah.
we're going to build a parking garage. Okay, that seems like a good idea when we, but like, or, you just think about the vast array of buildings. And so where's the funnel start? Is it just like deans coming to you?
Starts at the grassroots. It really starts with the deans in the schools, with unit heads like parking and transportation or athletics or safety and security in JJ's portfolio. And the concepts are outlined and brought forward to the executive vice presidents. Okay. They'll do an evaluation and say, okay, should we do this? Should we do it now? Should we defer it? All of that keeps funneling up to when the executive vice presidents and the president meet to determine what the program that you saw today should look like for the next year.
Gotcha.
That's how it starts, yeah. That's why we started in September.
And I assume if, other projects come, the Manning Institute or something, someone decides this is something they want to pursue and support, that will be just a non-functional way, or a big donor has an interest in something, that would be an independent.
Well, things can come onto the list that we weren't initially thinking about, and other things can get deferred. So it's very fluid. So there's a year-long process, and every year it can adjust, which is why we come back each year to show you the modifications. Things are coming off the list, new things are coming on the list. And then we also do within that a very comprehensive process of budget estimating along the way. Some people say, well, it only costs $5 million, and the expert of people in our team will sit down with the ultimate constituency group and talk about that, which I think you're going to speak more to.
Okay, thanks.
The second way is design build, which is a partnership between the designer and the builder from the start. We've used that, for instance, on parking garages. We've used it in student housing. And then the third way is construction manager at risk, which, given the complexity of our buildings, is usually the method that we use most often. I will say that when we use that often, or when we want to use that method, We have to send the request to the Department of General Services and the Division of Engineering and Buildings at the state. They in turn look at our justification for a CM at risk and will give us feedback and opinions, their opinion about whether or not a CM is needed. Up until July 1st of this year, like in 3 weeks, that opinion was advisory, and we could choose to not follow it if we felt strongly that the CM at risk was the way for us to manage the project. The General Assembly in the 24th session passed a new law that requires for every project that's $65 million or more, that we still have to do the same process, send it to the engineering and buildings. If they say, nah, we don't really think that you need a CM at risk, you ought to just do it low bid, and we disagree, then we have to bring it to you all, and you all have to approve it by a majority vote of the board. So that will be a new wrinkle in the development of projects. We're going to try to make it so that it doesn't delay a project, given the fact that you all only meet 4 times a year. But we'll have to work through that. But I just wanted to make you aware of that change.
Well,
Yes.
what was the driver behind that? What was the concern that the?
There's a very active lobbying arm that lobbies for smaller contractors.
Oh, yeah.
That believe that they get shut out of certain business because they can't act as a CM. And particularly higher education tends to do a lot of CM at risk. But, Don could share with you that we try not to do that when it's not necessary to do that. And that some firms, can actually do CM at risk.
Yeah, so we do quite a bit of low bid work, but it's on smaller projects, 10 million and below. The larger projects, Colette mentioned complexity, certainly like Center for the Arts, we already have approval to do a CM at risk if that project moves forward. Others as well. One thing that the state doesn't recognize is schedule. So we've taken a lot of advantage of improving our schedule by doing CM at risk. For example, on the buildings that were celebrated yesterday, the Football Operations Center, Olympic Sports, we did those CM at risk. The state did not approve that. We overruled the state, went ahead CM at risk anyway, and we gained 9 to 12 months on the schedule on those projects by getting early packages and getting into the field sooner. We also had the advantage in an escalating market of getting to the market sooner on a large portion of the project and saving a lot of money by doing that in both the subcontracted amount as well as the equipment, switchgear, and things like that were purchased. So they don't recognize schedule. So that's the biggest place. When we've disagreed with the state, it's all been around the schedule. Palmer Park, football, Olympic sports, all 3 of those were around the schedule.
And I just want to give a huge shout out to Don and Colette and, basically doing everything through the state, but then again, having the right to say, look, schedule is also a priority to everything that was discussed today and yesterday about schedule really matters. It affects not only the opening, but it also significantly impacts project costs. So this is a mechanism that we're going to want to continue to use periodically. So
Colette mentioned the lobbying group. They're very active, get a lot of attention. We've fortunately have a good relationship with them in that we do a lot of work with small contractors. And in fact, we try to right-size our projects to meet the capabilities of the contractor. We want our projects to be very important to the contractor. And if we have a small project, it may not be very important to a very large contractor. So we try to right-size our projects to meet the contractor's sweet spots, if you can say it that way. So we have a good relationship. We've met with that group any number of times. Regrettably, some of the other institutions don't look at their work the same way. And so I think that's where some of this has come about.
I wonder, given the change, and given that we're going to bring to the board the question of whether we do CM at risk or a low bid, it might be useful maybe at the next meeting to do a real walkthrough of the pros and cons, because it's not obvious to me why scheduling is affected by one route or the other.
Yeah, great idea.
great idea. Yeah.
Okay.
So, Colette,
Yes.
this has been very helpful in understanding the project development process. As I understand it, parking is one of like maybe 5 revenue-generating sources for the university. At what point is the revenue-generating strategy or capacity considered in the process?
Well, in terms of determining how the project would be funded, right? So all of, when you say
Not how it's going to be funded, the money you're going to make from
what you
parking.
can make from it?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it depends on the facility. So when it comes to an auxiliary enterprises like parking or housing, they not only have to pay for the project, but then they also have to pay to run it, operate it. We don't make money on parking. We hopefully carry our operating costs with the permit fees and whatnot that we charge. But something like the Center for the Arts, for instance, we've gone through extensive study on a facility like that and how much, money, the hotel's another example. We have a detailed pro forma on the hotel and how much revenue that will bring in, and it will cover its debt service and its operating costs. A lot of facilities aren't revenue generating, but.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Bert.
Yep.
Paul's question is sort of a good segue. I've got a company located at North Fork, and I've never been out there until I went out to a couple of meetings. It's spectacular. It's beautiful. We got 500 acres. Never had any idea. What is the occupancy, and how much of that is for-profit tenants, versus reserved for us?
It's a mix. Tenants are a mix.
It's all University of Virginia Foundation.
It's owned by the foundation.
Okay.
And it's a mix of tenants,
We
private.
don't have anything to do with that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Never
we do
mind.
because
Yeah.
you have seats on their board. But it's a mix of tenants, private tenants, as well as when we run out of space and the kind of space we need here, that's an opportunity to lease space out there, and we do have some occupants out there. AJ, did you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, the UVA Foundation is a separate 501c3. The Buildings and Ground Chairman, the Finance Chairman, and I, and Colette all sit on that board. The North Fork Research Park is managed and held by them. We are a tenant. We use some of the lease space there, including the Wet Lab Accelerator program you heard about yesterday.
That might not be a bad idea for another
Yeah,
future board session, is
absolutely.
to have Tim come in and talk about the role of the foundation. We did that a few years ago. I thought it was really helpful.
Okay.
And the potential up there.
Right,
Because you're
exactly.
right. I mean, it's huge potential. The problem is just been the distance between main grounds and there, and
Build an interstate into that.
I know.
It's also where our affordable housing initiative is, so there's a lot of opportunity and things underway at the North Fork Research Park.
It would be a great discussion to have with the board about how can we best use that, because there's a lot of land and a lot of
100 acres.
potential.
So I think also to Bert's question, the chairman of the UVA Foundation is either the rector or the rector's designee. So we do have elements of control over the foundation.
Influence,
Yeah.
not control, not control.
It's sort of like that we only do 4 hours of swimming a day.
Easy.
Let me add, Don, there was, one of the members brought this to me yesterday. Maintenance costs in new structures. When we did the South Lawn, we attempted to build in maintenance and increase an estimated level of cost into the donation to build the buildings. At that point, that really didn't work. We were told it isn't going to happen. Can you, again, there was a question to me privately, is that possible to build in maintenance cost into the estimate?
And Mr. Chairman, certainly we can estimate what the maintenance costs are going to be for any facility. We do that anyway to see what we need to approach our budgeting. To Currently, it's not built into the cost of the project. In most projects, it has been in a couple of them, but in most, it is not built in to the initial cost of the project. It can be. Don't know if that will be, how well that will be supported.
Well, the first question is, can it be, and
Yes.
estimated
Can
and
be.
moving forward? Then the next is, as a policy decision, do you try to build that in? So I just wanted to make certain it's possible.
It is.
Yeah, it's possible, but what you really need to do is you need to build an endowment, right? You have to set an endowment amount that will throw off income
Right.
every year to pay for that maintenance. And that's the nut that nobody can crack, because that's a big number added on to what you're already trying to raise perhaps for the building itself.
Depends on whether or not you're trying to do it for the entire life of the building or just to offset the first few years so it can be then adjusted into the operational budget.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, and that's, when we did the South Lawn, that's where we hit a wall. So it is possible.
It's possible in the first few years, as you say, Mr. Chairman, the first few years typically have lower maintenance costs, obviously, than the out years.
Good.
So to address how we develop the project budget, which I think, Mr. Wetmore, was your particular question at the last meeting. We have lots of data sources. We use professional cost estimators. Usually the architect's got an estimator, the CM will have an estimator. Sometimes we even use a third party. We do a lot of business around here, so we have a pretty good handle on what things cost to build. We could use a peer benchmark in some cases, and we did that on football operations. They toured around the country and looked at other facilities. But the other piece too is the market, all right? When we're building anything, inflation, supply chain issues are big issues, and were really big during COVID, and we still have some supply chain issues, long lead time items that it takes to get mechanical equipment and things like that for buildings. But what's interesting about Charlottesville is that we are a relatively small market for construction. We have limited numbers of subcontractors. I mean, we can attract the big national firms in to be construction managers, but they all have to use the subcontractors that are locally in the market. And frankly, we're sometimes our own worst enemies, because we're putting a lot of business on the street, and there's only so many contractors who can respond. So we need to be careful about that and balance that.
Maybe you're going to answer this next, but how often do you do the projects come in at original budget? Like, what's the percentage of accuracy on the budgets? Because as we're approving these budgets, like how often does that actually happen?
We went for quite a few years where that was typical. Now, in the more recent years with the escalating market, that's been a challenge because the budget is set well before we go out to market. So escalation has kind of gotten us in the recent years. Prior to that, it was typical that we would come in within the budget.
So like football operations, for example, that was not on budget, is that right? And then what was the driver of that? If you had to pick where you made wrong in the estimating process, was it supply chain, was it changes, like do you do a retrospective on these projects that are over budget so we can try to avoid doing that going forward? Because there's just so much action, and it seems like there's lots of room for.
You want to address
Yeah,
the
and so on football, the primary drivers there was escalation over time. That project was planned quite a few years ago, and then with fundraising constraints, it went into construction later than was originally planned, even though it was a very fast project in construction, 21 months from the time we started until yesterday with the grand opening. But still, we got a line on the budget early in the project, and we're able to maintain it all the way through, but it did take an initial jump as we went to the market. Same thing is true of other projects in the escalating period. If we're back now, we think, to more normal escalation of 3 to 5% a year, which is easy to estimate. Nobody's going to put an estimate together that says 25% escalation, which is what we're facing in 1921, 22 kind of time frame. And so I think we're in better shape now for maintaining focus on the budget than we were at that point in time.
And didn't we also have design changes along the way in football operations?
We had design changes, that's correct, certainly, and we have design
Well, we had a
changes.
change in leadership in the coach.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying,
which
there
was
was
a
the
little
external
complication.
pressures, but there was also changes internally as we were moving through.
Yeah, the key,
Expedited
yeah,
project.
exactly right, JJ. The key to any project is, get the design done and get it out to market, and don't change it along the way if we can. Now, there are reasons for changing that are legitimate and totally appropriate, particularly in a technology area. Some of the others, it's just a matter of people change, and there's changes as a result of that.
Is there any other questions?
I have a
Yes.
question. What would you estimate is our percentage of the work in this region in terms of us as customer? Like, what percentage? Are we 50% of the construction business in this area? More than that?
First of all, just the region that, like Colette mentioned, the region includes Richmond and the Valley, so it's not just Charlottesville. It's, we've got subcontractor personnel commuting every day from Richmond and areas like that. So I have no idea what our percentage is. It's a pretty good percentage. I just was clicking through yesterday. We've got about 700 million ready to go out for procurement now, in addition to what we talked about that's already underway. So, but there's a lot of work in the region. There's a lot of work in Richmond. There's data centers and different things like that. A lot of work in Northern Virginia. So it's a busy market in general, not just here, but in general.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if you'll indulge me, I've got something I'd like to read everybody. I think the board would like to hear this.
Please.
So, quick bit of background. We had a study done because our construction costs seem to be highly escalating, and we looked at ways what we could keep UVA's construction costs more in line with the market generally. One of the things that was suggested is that on certain projects we use construction manager to manage the construction companies. One of the first places we did that was the Darden Hotel where we were last night. That project was managed by Matthews Development, a development manager named Mike Matthews, who's very experienced, been around the community for years. He built the Martha Jefferson Hospital. He did Monticello's water system. He's done hotels, housing projects, office buildings, very experienced guy. I'm working with him on something, and completely unsolicited, last week, he sent me this note. I can also say, after deep experience, that the leaders I deal with at UVA are amazing. I have been saying this for a while, but Don Sundgren is the best I have ever encountered in my career. Ben Hayes is an exceptional building official. The Darden Hotel would have opened 6 months later with anyone else in charge. They hold us to the highest standards, but are pragmatic, personable, and get-it-done people. Alice Rauscher and her team have been exceptional. When I have needed to interact at the J.J. Davis level, I have found her to be absolutely fantastic. My business partner, Casey Steffen, told me the other day after a meeting at UVA that every interaction she has had with the UVA team makes her proud of her undergraduate degree and Darden degrees from UVA. They are all that good. I could not agree more, and I hope that the Board of Visitors knows what amazing leadership you have at UVA. Unsolicited.
Yes. Thank you.
Alice, we owe Mike a drink.
Clearly at the phone.
You must have a couple bids on the table.
Well, I know
Okay, I know we have one other final item. Alice is going to review the design plans for Shannon Court,
Yeah,
and
We'll,
we're running over. We'll get
come
billed.
back to some of this next time. Oh, this we threw in a few of our more transformational projects. So if you have not gone to Brandon Avenue yet, the right hand, this is the way it looks right now. The 2 new residence halls are on the right, and this is a total, the before picture is on the upper left. So you'll see what it used to look like and what it looks like now. And that's all around planning and then construction. And athletics, you were there last night, so.
Thanks. I'll go through this really quickly, but so this project is of relatively modest scale, would not really meet the threshold of projects we bring to you, but it is in a rather prominent location. So just wanted you to be aware of what we were thinking. As you know, 2 courts flank the rotunda, the Darden Court to the east and the Shannon Court to the west. Both courts are obviously highly used spaces and provide an important landscape context for the building and a threshold to the lawn. These spaces were both redesigned by the Olin Studio Landscape Architects as part of the most recent rotunda renovation. So each court was intended to provide an inviting and flexible space with its own unique character. The Darden Court on the right is much more enclosed and much more enclosed and contemplative. The Shannon Court on the left is more open and outward facing. The Darden Court was completed as part of the renovation, but the Shannon Court remained unfinished when we completed the rotunda renovation due to some budgetary constraints. As you can see from these photos, the planting in the Darden Court on the right is very lush with the central fountain. The Shannon Court on the left is a little more Spartan in its current condition. It's intended to be a very active space, particularly because of the multi-purpose room that is directly above it on this slide, which holds numerous events throughout the year, but it doesn't really have as much in the way of planting. So the design update for the Shannon Court retains the symmetrical design of the 2016 plan and creates a central open area for a variety of formal and informal events to support the programming of the adjacent multipurpose room. It adds new planting beds with both fixed and flexible seating, and the plantings will be ornamental and appropriately scaled to the space, which means they will not come above the balustrade of the terraces. As you can see from the slide, the proposed plan for the Shannon Court will provide flexibility for many types of events, a presentation and more formal seating on the left, and much more flexible seating on the right. I hear there are lots of salsa lessons that happen actually at this court. We propose to use a rich palette of materials consistent with the overall rotunda landscape, and the original 1978 dedication plaque to President Shannon will be recreated and placed in this court. And then finally, the new arrangement of planters will create more seating, define the open central event area, and a flow of people throughout the space. The new trees, scaled appropriately for the historic space, will provide a balance of sun and shade, and the palette of understory native plants will provide a resilient and educational component to the design. So we're planning to finish the design drawings this year and begin and actually complete the construction of this court next summer before the students get there. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
There's no water feature.
No water feature.
Good. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
And before we adjourn, I'd like to take just a minute to acknowledge the Service to Buildings and Grounds Committee. Mark, Elizabeth, Tom, thank you. Combined, I think you have over 8 years of, no, individually over 8 years on buildings and grounds. So thank you very much for your service. We appreciate it. And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
We're out of here.
Thank you.
Director, thank you. I'd like to call the Committee on WISE to order.
Okay, Mark, let me just grab my people.
Take your time.
Coffee.
Break.
I think that I can.